Carson's campaign is based in part on his inspirational life story, a story that is now being challenged by media outlets that the doctor is convinced are out to get him. Carson has written and often spoken about being an angry and somewhat violent teenager, including an incident in which he tried to stab a friend. CNN spoke to some old friends and neighbors who recalled him as a well-behaved boy.
CNN set out to find the classmates who Carson says were victims of the attacks, but so far has been unable to locate any of them. The Carson campaign declined to provide names of those involved or eyewitnesses, calling CNN's examination into Carson's past a witch hunt.
Carson admitted to Megyn Kelly that in his autobiography he changed the identity of the person he says he stabbed from a close relative to a friend, and then he really got into it with CNN's Allison Camerata.
But let me ask you flat out whether you stand by the claim that you, as a young man, as a 14-year-old boy, attempted to stab another boy and attacked your mother with a hammer.
Those claims are absolutely true. I am 100% sure that they are true. And this is simply an attempt to smear and to deflect the argument to something else.
CNN has been trying to find people who were involved in these incidents or witnessed these.
Tell me what makes you think that you're going to find those specific people. Tell me how your methodology works, because I don't understand it. This is a bunch of lies.
On Friday, a screaming headline in Politico accused Carson, in his autobiography, of fabricating a claim that he'd gotten a full scholarship or been offered a full scholarship to West Point. The doctor's campaign accusing Politico of an outright lie. Carson offered this explanation to Bill O'Reilly.
You were never formally offered any kind of accommodation to West Point. Is that correct?
Right. I was just told that it would be very easy for me.
Okay. So that should have been a little clearer on page 57 of your book, correct?
I guess it could have been more clarified. I told it as I understood it.
Joining us now to sort through all this, Mercedes Schlapp, a U.S. News columnist, political consultant, and former White House aide to George W. Bush. Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post, who covers Donald Trump. And Penny Lee, a Democratic strategist and commentator. All right, so Ben Carson made a mistake in writing that he'd been offered a full scholarship to West Point. Politico backing off the screaming headline. Was this a legitimate story?
No, I think Politico got an F in reporting because they even had to change the headline. So they went from fabricating a West Point scholarship to a different headline.
Claim West Point scholarship but never applied.
And so, you're there. And they also said that he had applied, but in fact, Carson had never made that case. He said he had never applied. So again, I think Politico got it wrong in this case.
So when you say F in reporting, does that mean the story should never have been published?
I think they had the facts wrong. I think that, yes, I don't think they should have reported it.
Robert Costa, Carson uses really strong language, especially lately, in hitting back against the media. Liars, witch hunt, garbage. He seems offended that reporters are digging into his past.
For so many presidential contenders, they rise through the ranks in House races and gubernatorial races and Senate races, and the press gradually vets these candidates. What we're seeing right now is this uncomfortable confluence with the press and Carson, someone new to the national stage. The national press doesn't really know who he is. They're digging into his records, and it's just the way it's unfolding is uncomfortable for both sides, but both seem they think they're coming from the right position. It's just they're meeting at this hot moment.
Penny Lee, does Politico get credit for trying to hold Carson accountable for what he acknowledges was, one can say, a small misrepresentation or embellishment in his book?
Sure, they do on that, but you have to be very careful and not overreach, because then you play right into the hands of the candidate, and that's what unfortunately Politico did when they went too far. Yes, every fact is now going to be examined like every presidential candidate has always had throughout their history. Barack Obama, you went through point by point that he made in both of his two books.
But Carson is not accustomed to this because he has never been a politician.
To Robert's point, he is not being accustomed to. But the news outlets, it is on them to be able to hold the restraint and do it on the fact basis.
It's to Ben Carson's benefit. He raised $3.5 million in 1 week because of this supposed media witch hunt. But it's the media's job to scrutinize every single presidential candidate. Today in the Washington Post, you had Marco Rubio and the messy financial statements. Yeah. This is what the media's job has to be, but they got to get the facts right.
So on that point, the CNN has a couple of reporters interview old friends and classmates to find out if they can find anybody who knows anything about these supposedly violent incidents when he was 14, 15. Is that a witch hunt, as Carson puts it?
Well, again, the media has got to do its job. But these stories were 50 years ago.
Right.
With that being said, they went to the campaign. They asked them for these names. I'm telling you, this is a shoestring campaign. Right now, what they're focused on is organizing in Iowa and New Hampshire. They don't want to have to deal with having to give these names out to these reporters.
I don't think the Carson campaign has any obligation whatsoever to help reporters do these particular stories. But at the same time, I mean, CNN didn't say Carson lied about this. They said we weren't able to find anybody who could substantiate this. But isn't this kind of an upside-down, topsy-turvy situation? Here you have CNN saying, no, our reporting suggests that he was really a nice, quiet young man, and the candidate saying, oh, no, I was very violent and I was an angry guy. It's kind of the opposite of what you would expect.
It is a unique situation to have a presidential candidate try to use supposed acts of criminality to authenticate themselves as a national presidential candidate. Usually candidates are veering away from talking about stabbing and taking a hammer to their mother. It's a little odd to watch, but it is what it's the part of the Carson story, and he's sticking by it.
But, CNN was in a position of trying to prove a negative. And I think the reporting effort makes sense. I mean, every candidate who runs, this, has reporters trying to find, the high school girlfriend and all that stuff, what kind of person was this as a young man or a woman. But talking to 9 people doesn't prove that who wouldn't necessarily know, as Carson says, that he tried to hit his mother with a hammer or came close to it, wouldn't necessarily know these incidents.
No, right. And I think Ben Carson has got to be prepared. This is just the start of it. This is a lot more months ahead to go. There's going to be much more media scrutiny, and also from his own fellow candidates that are on that stage. They have trackers. They're also going to be checking the scrutiny and verifying his own authenticity. So I think this is going to be something, is he going to be able to react? I think the media has got to own it themselves to be responsible in a very systematic way going forward, because we also know this is just the start of it.
Well, in the media today, obviously, in Meet the Press, they had an interview with Ben Carson, and they basically asked, well, what about your mother? Why doesn't your mother or brother come out? And you know what Ben Carson had to say? It was Chris Jansen.
Okay.
And you know what Carson had to say? My mother has Alzheimer's. Guess what? There's a sympathetic approach that the viewers are going to say, you really asked this question of where's your mother? And Ben Carson has to answer, my mother has Alzheimer's?